sets are the perfect way to engage with the latest thinking, issue by issue. They make revalidation easy and are the perfect accompaniment to any project or university coursework. In addition to video from expert speakers across maternity and midwifery, there is easily accessible research and links to the latest government policy documents. Our reflective questions at the end are the perfect primer for your revalidation. In the same way the Maternity and Midwifery Forum provides certificates to show that you have attended these festivals, we can provide certificates for those who have consumed the content of a box set and submitted their written answers to the reflective questions provided by our curator, Dr. Jenny Hall. Midwives, maternity professionals and students, do not miss out. Subscribe to Matflix today. Check out the box sets at www.matflix.co.uk.
I'm Nicole Rajan Brown. I'm a proud midwife and I'm proud to be supporting the Maternity and Midwifery Forum, who have helped me to grow, and for creating wonderful professional digital and online resources for midwives across the globe. The Maternity and Midwifery Forum ran their programs free and online all through COVID. Now we want to grow the catalogue, spread it worldwide and keep it free to use for students and staff. To do this, we have launched a fundraising appeal to help keep all of the 8 wonderful maternity and midwifery festivals free. Keep the weekly Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the weekly newsletters free to midwives and maternity staff. You regularly tell us how much you value these free resources, so do give what you can.
The Maternity and Midwifery Forum brings you Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. All your CPD and revalidation needs met in one place. Our expertly curated box sets are the perfect way to engage with the latest thinking, issue by issue. They make revalidation easy and are the perfect accompaniment to any project or university coursework. In addition to video from expert speakers across maternity and midwifery, there is easily accessible research and links to the latest government policy documents. Our reflective questions at the end are the perfect primer for your revalidation. In the same way the Maternity and Midwifery Forum provides certificates to show that you have attended these festivals, we can provide certificates for those who have consumed the content of a box set and submitted their written answers to the reflective questions provided by our curator, Dr. Jenny Hall. Midwives, maternity professionals and students, do not miss out. Subscribe to Matflix today. Check out the box sets at www.matflix.co.uk.
Hour. It's series 13 and it's session 12, and it's the last in the series because it's summertime now, though you might not believe it because it's not terribly sunny at the moment, but never mind. My name's Sue MacDonald and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals and the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, and it's my pleasure to be chairing the session today. And I've got two lovely guests, and the first is Dr. Alice Enyon. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm always worried about that. And Diane Garland. And because we always do this to our guests, we always ask them to share a moment of the week. So could I start, Diane, with you sharing your moment of the week with us?
Okay, well, thank you very much for everyone who's joined this evening. Mine's sort of a mixed moment of the week. I'm sure many of us know about Hurricane Beryl that's hitting the Caribbean. And I'm very glad to say I've managed to get back in touch with 3 colleagues who live and work from 3 of those islands. So that's the Cayman Islands, Barbados and Anguilla. And very pleased to say not only are they safe, but of course it's the communities, the women that they support and the families. So all of those 3 are very safe in those 3 islands. But I do know, of course, Jamaica has been particularly badly hit. So, yeah, we'll obviously think of them all and they'll be in my prayers tonight. But I'm very grateful my friends and their families are very safe. So.
Absolutely. That's really a lovely moment of the week. Thank you, Dan. And as you say, we keep them in our prayers and our thoughts, because when you look at the pictures, you just can't imagine it, how awful it must be, keeping safe and well. Thank you, Diane. Now, how about Alice? Do you have a moment of the week to share with us?
I do. Thanks, Sue. And hello, everybody. My moment of the week it's a small moment. I was talking to a colleague who shared something with me, just something that they've been going through was difficult. And I spoke to them and I listened. And they sent me a message afterwards to say, thank you so much, that I felt heard, I felt listened to, and it really helped me. And sometimes you just need to be reminded that the little things that you do can make a difference. I wasn't trying to direct them. I wasn't trying to offer advice. I was simply being someone who could listen and nod and say, yes, I'm hearing you right now. but I needed that, and I didn't realize I needed it until I had the feedback. And I realized how much that feedback meant to me, that my presence had made a difference in someone's day and someone's difficult week. So it was a great moment, and I was really grateful to get that little bit of positive feedback.
Fabulous. And that's really the essence of being a midwife, of course, Alice, isn't it?
Yes.
Being with and really listening. And it's one of the things that actually is interesting over the last few weeks when we've been talking about different reports. It's one of the things that women say that they're unhappy with, that we don't always listen. And because we're really busy, we may not listen as we need to. So that is lovely feedback, and thank you for sharing. That's perfect. What a role model. Thank you so much, and thank you to Diane as well for sharing that important moment of the week. I'm just going to just do a little bit to welcome those who are new to us, and I know we have new people coming every week, as well as the regular people that come to us, and welcome it to everybody. But I'll just remind us, because I kind of feel I need to, that we came from the pandemic. When the pandemic first lockdown in the UK happened, we really felt that midwives and student midwives and people within the maternity service, that was our main concern, didn't have the kind of connections they would have had normally. We didn't have study days, we didn't have conferences, we didn't have festivals. And people were looking for a lot of information and needing to connect. And it's one of the things, and I've noticed when we've now got back into having festivals and face-to-face meetings, it's something very precious, especially for midwives and student midwives, to have that connection with other people. So we started the hour, and initially we talked a lot about COVID-19. We talked a lot about service changes and what midwives were doing and what student midwives were doing, and talked about ways of keeping people's well-being up. And we've kind of adjusted as we've gone, because we don't talk so much about COVID-19, but it was where we came from, if you like. So I think it's still important to remember, and it's still around, and still people are being poorly with it. And we need to kind of remember that as we go. Now, I also need to say to those of you who are new that everything the Maternity and Midwifery Forum does is recorded. So if you have a power cut, or you have to leave the screen and break your concentration with this session, you can always catch up, because it's recorded and looked after by Matflix. You can access it for free anytime afterwards, and you can access the whole now what would you call it, a massive library of videos that I think there's probably about 1700 videos now they're available. And you can access it if you're doing any research topics, or if you're doing a dissertation, you're doing assignments for your university course or college course. You can access this for free and you can use it. And it's actually, the other thing is, for those of you doing any revalidation, fantastic resource, and do feel free to access it. Health warning is a bit addictive once you get in, and you might start looking around and watching people like Alice and Diane talking and thinking, oh, I must see some more of what they've done before, and you find you're there for a couple of hours. So just be a bit cautious about that and your time, because time is very precious. The other thing is, do share with your colleagues. So this evening, I know you're going to find it interesting and useful, and you might want to share it with your colleagues, and please do. And arrange to maybe have it in the coffee room, if you manage to get a coffee break, and sit down together and have a chat with it and look at what's going on. Now, I've just realised I haven't switched something off. That's it. Sorry about that. Ding dong. And the other thing is, I want to say a big thank you to students and to midwives at the moment. We're coming to the end of the series, but you're coming to the beginning of the summer, and the work continues. And when people go off on holiday, people are a bit busier. There's obviously people going off sick or going off wherever, and you're carrying on providing care to mums and babies and families. So thank you for all that you're doing, and a big for you all while I'm here. Now, this week, I'm going to talk very quickly. I've got a few things to say. It's UK Create Week, which is perfect for what we're going to be talking about this evening. So remember that. This week on Friday, it's the 75th birthday of our wonderful NHS in the UK. So happy birthday to the NHS. I'm sure there's going to be lots of celebrations on the Friday. It's also Baby Communication Week, and this has been led by the Brazelton Centre, and there is a link on the resources sheet to today's activity. I've been watching a lot of this on Twitter, so it's well worth looking, because they're looking really at how we communicate with babies, how to help mums and parents communicate with their babies even better. And of course, this week, in fact, tomorrow is the UK national election. And all I'm going to say is remember to vote. Take your little passport with you and go and vote. Even if it's whoever you're going to vote for, but vote. Don't you waste your vote. You have a say. It may not feel like it, but do it. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. Just to say also, interestingly, I know the NMC had a new interim chief executive officer who's actually had to step down after 4 days. I don't know who the new chief exec is going to be, but this was over staff concerns over a race discrimination case that was before in her workplace. So it's a bit of a time of change. The other thing is, I want to say big congratulations to Sophie Russell, who's just been elected president of the Royal College of Midwives, been elected by us members. So congratulations to Sophie. She has come on the Maternity Hour before, so I hope she'll come in the future as well, next series, because we will be having series 14 in September. And I'll also say to you, there's a couple of really good articles on Maternity and Midwifery Forum. They're quite short, so they're quite digestible for busy practitioners, and they're both on the resources list that are available by the side of you, as always. Okay, now, as this evening, and I'm almost perfect time, which I'm very pleased with, we're having a slightly different evening. So we're going to be looking at the summer, and I was kind of thinking, well, we're coming for a summer break. All of us are going to be looking about having a bit of a break, whether we're going off somewhere very exotic and lovely or staying at home and doing all the bits and pieces in the garden, whatever. But there's also a bit more time for things like catching up with yourself, maybe doing a little bit of creative writing, a bit of reading, catching up all those books you've had sitting around for ages and you always meant to read. So I was really so pleased. I've got two fantastic people who can just steer us a little bit in both directions, because they're both authors, they're both editors, and they're both very creative. And you'll see from both of their backgrounds how creative they are. And so we'll start with Dr. Alice Enyon. She's a senior lecturer. She's a novelist of 2 books so far, and that's Inshallah and Ash, which you may have read. She's also the editor-in-chief of the lovely Practicing Midwife Journal, and she describes herself as a polymath. And I particularly like that she says that we can all achieve anything if we believe in ourselves. She says, so she's rightly, very rightly, a teacher and a midwife, obviously, and she's held a variety of different roles in higher education. And so I'm going to say a big welcome to Alice, and thank you for coming. And the screen is now yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really chuffed to be here, to be honest. And I'm just going to start my presentation. Hopefully this is going to work. And sharing now, and just checking. Is it working? Yes, it's working. Hurrah. So hello everybody, and thank you for taking some time to listen to me and to watch if you're watching. I was asked to talk about my experiences as an author, and how for me, this is how they're tied in with me being a midwife. So the title is In Other Words, because there are always other words. And I'm Alice Enyon, and I've been writing since I was about this big. Since I was 7, I wanted to be a novelist. But coming to midwifery was not necessarily my first choice of career. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because stories have always fascinated me. Stories have always been the thing that drew me in, that helped me understand life. I'd learned a lot from stories. Some of my favorite books taught me more about the world and life than in fiction than I'd ever seen in fact. And I've always believed the stories are the fundamental part of who we are and how we live and how we express ourselves. And so I was always driven with this desire to understand, to experience stories, and also to write and share them. And it was I've always felt that there's things I want to say, and there's things that I want to hear from other people as well. So this idea that we're all tellers of tales has really underpinned my entire midwifery career, and all of the creation, the writing, the creative thought that has gone alongside it. And I do feel that quite often we forget just how valuable it is to read outside of facts. And one other thing is that midwives are very much embedded in a medical system which is quite grounded in the age of enlightenment, and this idea of us being reasoning, that the human being is, the highest way of thinking is through reason. And I don't actually think that's necessarily the case, because we are holistic midwives. We're human beings. We're beings. And in that we have feelings, and it's feelings that give meaning to our words and our experiences. And so I do feel that as a midwife, I evolved from this understanding of the power of stories. So I'm going to start with my story, and I'm going to be brief. But in the beginning, I was not going to be a midwife. I was going to be a writer. And then something happened to me. I had a most amazing birth experience. Typical of many midwives, I had a brilliant midwife with my first pregnancy. She was utterly amazing. And at the point where I was birthing my first child, I looked in her eyes and I knew that that was what I wanted to do with my life. That was what was going to give my life true meaning. But sadly, my first child died. And this was the beginning of that story. And it's been the same story ever since. From that moment, that inciting moment, my life changed and I became a midwife. But I never forgot my love of stories, and also my love of the written word. So I love this picture of me. I look so young. I took the usual route that you did at the time. I went through nursing first, and then went to London to do one of the very first degrees in midwifery that you could do alongside midwifery registration. And I absolutely loved it. I knew I was in the right place. But through all of it, I never forgot my love of words and of storytelling. I qualified, and luckily, I also had another pregnancy, which this time did not result in a tragic ending. So my son lived. And I started my first jobs, as we all do, in midwifery. And I discovered, as I was becoming the midwife I'd always wanted to be, that much of what I did linked to this idea of creativity, to the words, to the stories we tell. The way we learn and the way we teach is all about stories. A handover at the beginning of a shift, it's a story. We tell a narrative. And I also discovered that there was a difference in the way that we tell stories compared to the way other colleagues, particularly medical colleagues, but other colleagues might tell stories, because we tended to put the human more central in our stories. But our stories, our midwife stories, were the ones that weren't necessarily front and center. Throughout my clinical work, I was juggling motherhood and midwifery, which was a challenge. And I also did 2 master's degrees. I did one in professional development, which was for my career and which was really, really useful. And I rely on that knowledge all the time. I have done throughout my career. But I took another step, and that was to do a master's in creative writing, because I wanted to follow that passion. I've always written stories. I've tried writing novels before, way before this. And I invested in myself. And I hope that resonates with you, that it was the first time I'd given myself permission to actually invest in something that was not necessarily career focused, but was for my own pleasure and my own development. And it was the right decision. And from that, I was able to develop my skills and my understanding. I moved into academia and started teaching midwifery. And as you can see here, we can see a student waiting for feedback on their essay. I love teaching, and I discovered that teaching is all about telling stories. So maybe you've heard of the concept of the wise story or the wisdom story. Much of what we do, we actually share through those stories, those wisdom stories. We give case examples, we discuss our experiences. And I learned through all of it, I learned that when I tell a story, students listen, they engage much more than when I'm just giving bare facts, because the feelings give more meaning to the words. And through all my experiences, I've worked in some amazing places with some amazing women and colleagues. and also some amazing students. And it's those stories that have inspired me throughout. So I met another midwife when I was working clinically who was writing fiction. And I really believed myself that I could potentially do that. So I decided to do my PhD. Now, my PhD is actually in women's writing, and it was very, very illuminating. So I studied women's fiction, women's narratives, I studied factual narratives, women's life writing, and it totally changed my world. It was from that I got the confidence to then be sending out books to get published. So all through my career, and I want you to think about this, we see midwifery as we're in clinical and you might follow this path, that midwifery is a profession with so many possibilities. You can publish, you can write academically, you can write opinions, you can write anything you want to write. You can come on a wonderful program like this and talk about what you do, who you are, your experiences, your knowledge, your insight. There's always the scope. For me, I have loved writing all the way through my career, and I have loved the scope that I've had to express myself. So I've published 4 books, 2 of which were co-written or edited, and 2 of which are novels that I wrote myself and published. And it has changed the way I see things, because my work always focuses on the voices of women. On the voices of women, whether they're midwives or mothers, on the voices of childbearing people. That's where my focus has been. And it has driven me through everything that I do. All I can see is this theme of what are the stories? Where are the stories from? And if you take anything from what I'm saying today, one of the things I want you to take is that you can do this too. You can do this. You can tell your stories. You can write in whatever form it is. And I do believe that everything has a narrative shape. Everything is shaped like a story. Even a journal article has its own story. So during my career, what I ended up seeing and researching much more was this idea of stories. I researched birth stories presented in the media. So the reality TV shows like The Midwives, which was an old BBC program on midwives, or One Born Every Minute, which helped me to understand the way that we talk about birth, midwifery, motherhood, and what kinds of stories shape that. I also looked at student midwife stories. And what you can see in this picture is student midwife learning journals from one of my places of employment, where we looked at the learning journals that the students kept throughout their 3 years, which did form part of their clinical assessment. And it taught me an awful lot about the experience of student midwives so that we could make that better. So there's so much power and value in a good story. What we often forget, though, is that the gap between creative writing and academic writing is not that big. They are both acts of creation, and they come from one thing, which is your voice, your words, your experience. And I do believe that if more midwives and student midwives and mothers felt confident to share and express their stories, we would be changing and evolving the landscape of midwifery and maternity care even more rapidly than we already are. The other thing that I was surprised at, because I was never, you might be surprised to hear this, but I was never that fond of public speaking. I love teaching. Public speaking came harder, but I found there's a great value and a great joy in going out there and standing up for what matters to you and speaking about it. And I've been really lucky and had plenty of opportunities to do that, including getting to meet some famous people. Just a little picture there. But it was always a challenge, because I'd think, well, why would anybody want to hear what I've got to say? And that was another lesson, because imposter syndrome is absolutely rife in midwifery academia, in nursing academia. And actually, we all have something of value to add and to contribute, but it can take quite a lot of support to enable you to feel confident to do that. One of the biggest and most valuable things that happened to me throughout this journey, alongside being able to work with such amazing students and midwives, was to then step into an editorial role as the editor-in-chief of the Practicing Midwife Journal. I had been writing quite a lot for the journal and done some editorial work with them. And this role It just is the most exciting thing you could do. In this role, I get to see firsthand what midwives are saying, what they're writing. I get to work with midwives and birth workers and student midwives and academics of all kinds, and to actually help them to get their voices out, help them to get their words published, and help them to keep shaping the ongoing narrative that is midwifery. And this is what I want you to think about. Every single one of you, every single person out there who is involved in maternity care, in midwifery, it to any degree has something to contribute and has something to share, but we lack the confidence to do so. So when I started in the role, I thought, well, this is all about getting articles in and getting them shaped and then getting them out again. But what I discovered was that more and more, my role involves developmental editing. It's working with people and helping them to see how they can put their words onto paper or onto the screen, and how they can shape their stories so that they can be more effective and they can reach an audience. And there's such a power in that. And that's one of the things that I was not expecting, that I would end up working so closely with people. And it has reminded me that any forum in which you can express that story can be of real value. What we have in places like the Maternity Midwifery Festivals and this hour and Matflix and in the Practicing Midwife is a community that is huge and diverse and willing and ready to listen and to read if we only have the confidence to speak. So enough about me. What about you? What I really want to talk to you about is that through all of this, I've never stopped writing. I'm still writing. I'm still creating. I'm editing another edited collection at the moment for Demeter Press on midwives, motherhood, and mythology, which is proving to be really interesting. And I'm also writing another novel. I've never lost this passion for creation, and I think quite a lot of us, they kind of get sucked out of you as you're going through the challenges of a busy midwifery career. Your passion for creation or your energy for creation might be sucked out of you. So I'm just here to remind you that actually it's okay to give yourself permission to do the things that you want to do, and to remember that your identity is part of this whole journey. Your whole identity is a story that's a product of your entire life journey. You have a collective identity, but it's you that's writing your story, your life story. And there are things that you might want to share. Your voice is important. You are the authority on your own experiences. You are the authority on your own work, on your own life. And that voice, your voice, could be the thing that makes a difference to someone else. It could be the thing that turns the tide for someone else. It might be something that you say or write would enable someone to enter midwifery or to stay in midwifery. Or it might be that a mother feels better about her birth experience because of what you've said, or that a student feels motivated because of what you've written. So come back to your voice and remember that you have things to say, and that regardless of how the world seems to think that there's a divide between science and fiction, there actually isn't, because the best stories are the ones based in fact, even when we extrapolate to make a fiction story. It's your story. This is what I've learned throughout my whole career after 25 years of doing this. It's your story. And if it's your story, you've got the power to make choices, to make decisions, and to make it a good one. So think about it. There's nothing more exciting to me than looking at somebody's story and realizing that they are speaking and expressing themselves in a way that I can learn from, in something that adds to and changes my world. To take a look at your stories, and don't be afraid to write and speak them in a way that reinforces a positive self-image for yourself and for other people. Because we should value ourselves, we should value our learning, and we should show our respect for others through the words that we share. I've learned that the language we use in midwifery and the words we share very much show and demonstrate how we as a profession integrate our values into our identities and how we act as role models for others. And that can happen through any medium. Respecting ourselves is the first step to respecting others. So that means actually valuing what you have to say and knowing that it's worth it. You are worth it. Your words are worth it. I love writing. I love creating, but everything that I write or create, fiction or fact, comes from that same place. And it is all a creative act. So I wanted to give you a little bit of inspiration, but also a little push to go out there and to write. So I've summarized some basic guidelines for writing, and I'm going to split it into nonfiction and fiction because they are a bit different. And I'd like you to not be afraid to think about, well, could I put something out there? You don't have to have hardcore primary research to get writing or to publish. You've got things to say, you've got opinions, you've got analysis, you've got experiences. All of these are valuable. So let's just quickly look at some of the stepping stones that could help you to get out there and to just write. First of all, if it's nonfiction, get your idea and read what is already written about it, because that can really help you to locate what you're writing in what's happening in the world. And then, absolutely key, where are you going to publish it? Pick a place where you want to publish it and check their guidelines. So if you came to the Practicing Midwife, you'd come to our website and you'd look at our author guidelines. Always download the author guidelines. And then obviously make contact with the editor. So if it's Practicing Midwife, it's me. Propose your idea and wait for some feedback. And don't be afraid of feedback. Have to be able to take feedback. It's not fun, but you have to. And then write according to the guidelines. Stick to any submission dates, please. And don't be afraid to then once you submit, to get the feedback and to act on it, because all the best writing is in editing. The other thing I'd say to you as well is also you can look for calls for papers. Lots of journals and publishers will put out calls for papers, calls for chapters, and that one of those might strike a chord with you. It might be something you're an expert on. It might be something you've got experience of. Don't be afraid to write. And also look for others who are interested in the same topic, because people can be really valuable in terms of collaboration. And when you talk to people who are interested in the same thing as you, sometimes they say, oh, let's get together and do something about that. I've had some great collaborations with people because of that. So that's your nonfiction. Fiction. I love fiction. I read a lot. You can't tell. There's like a gazillion books behind me. And the best writers do read a lot. There's an old adage in fiction, and it goes for facts as well. Write what you know. In fiction, you should write what you know and what you understand. That doesn't mean it all has to be from your own experience, but the things that you know and you understand gives you an authentic voice. Think about what you read, and then think about, if you want to write fiction and you're scared, what's the book or the story or the poem that you always wanted to read? Think about that and then write that book. That's the book you want to read, so write it. And don't be afraid to. Getting to know other writers can be really helpful as well, because they can inspire you, they can motivate you, and they can also help you to realize, when you have those dark moments when you're sitting there with your pen thinking, why am I writing this? And you've lost any confidence, or you've got a big writer's block, they can get you through that, and they can remind you just how valuable it is to keep going and keep telling your story, because someone will want to read it. And then come back to you. As I said before, your voice matters. So find your voice. And that just means writing in whatever format you like. You need to find your writing routine. Where can you write? When can you write? What conditions help you to write? And you can look at all kinds of fiction and non-fiction writers who will tell you about the conditions they need to write. They might need to go and write in their writing shed. They might need to stand up. They might need to write on yellow paper with a particular pen. Everybody has their own approaches, but give yourself permission to be that writer and then just write. It doesn't matter if it's rubbish. It doesn't matter, because the first draft is never what you publish anyway. Just keep writing and write and write and write until you've got everything down, because then you can go back and you can fix the story on editing. My first novel, Inshallah, it took me 6 years to write. It was part of my PhD, and then it had to be rewritten in order to be published. And it was almost unrecognizable in many ways, the final published version, from when I first started writing it. It took a lot of editing. And we all have to kill our darlings. That's what we call it in writing. You have to actually slash and burn and cut out thousands and thousands of much loved, painful words that were, practically bled onto the page. But ultimately, there's a discipline in it and it feels really good. And once you've got your story down, there is it's like having a child, and you send it out into the world, and then you have to just let it do its own thing. Any method that you choose to write is right. Just express what you want to express and enjoy it. I absolutely love it. There are two things I love to do. I love to read and I love to write. And both of them give me a complete breakaway from the world, where I enter into a creative space and I can dwell there for a while. And it's like taking a holiday. It is so rejuvenating and it's so empowering. So I just want to say to you that, yes, you can write, you should write, and don't be afraid to try. So I just want to come back to this. Everyone has a story. Whether it's a story you are telling someone to teach them something, whether it's a story you're sharing with a mother to help her to feel empowered during her birthing journey, whether it's a story you're writing down and sending off to a publisher, or an article you're writing, whether it's that story you tell at the end of your working day and you just offload everything onto your significant other. Your story matters, but you are in charge of it. You are in control. So let's make it a good one. So that's me. I'd like to say again, thank you very much. And there's my contact details. And it's been a pleasure to share this with you all. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alice. I don't know. I'm thinking, would I have my writing shed? Would that make a better writer? It's just, well, I mean, I love writing too. So we're as twins on here, and that's fantastic. Thank you so much for starting us off and getting us thinking. And of course, I mean, we'll have some questions. So those of you there, if you have a question, just pop it into the chat box and Paul will feed it through to me. And I'm looking over here because that's where they'll come through to. I know Alice will be very happy to answer any questions that come through, no matter small or big. Always good. That's great. Thank you so much. Now, next, I'm delighted to introduce Diane Garland, midwifery consultant, author of Water Birth, An Attitude to Care, which is in kind of new production now, which I'm sure Diane's going to mention. And those of you who know Diane will know she loves traveling, and she travels all over the world teaching evidence-based water birth, provides antenatal education for midwives and for parents on water birth. She's also an expert witness and a CQC advisor. And she's going to talk to us now about the other bits of her role. She often finds other things to do, and part of it is about reading a lot, because just as she loves writing too, but she loves reading too. So welcome, Diane. The screen is now yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to load my slides quickly. Hopefully they won't take too long. Shouldn't do. I think actually we're triplets rather than just twins, because I've certainly been very passionate about writing, reading, and like Alice, certainly for many, many years. I think even as a child, sadly, I've lost both my parents now, but I'm just waiting for the screen to come up and catch up with me. Lovely. And I certainly wrote vividly as a child. I was a pain. I always used to do my homework on literature and language, and to the detriment of maths and anything else I didn't particularly like. But anyway, I got there. So this was slightly different for me as well. And it's nice to share some of the other projects I do, because many of you may know me with my water birth hat on, but I do have lots of other hats, including being a businesswoman. I do run my own business, which was a big, big learning curve for me. But embedded with all of this is my passion for midwifery, the families, my colleagues that I work with. And this particular aspect of what I call my summertime reading really came about, and I know Sue said, you know, we have moved away and on from COVID, but this actually was embedded during COVID, where I couldn't get out and about, and I was doing a lot of Zoom teaching, which again, I'm passionate about, but it's not the same, as we all know, as face to face. And I was approached by an American journal, which is Midwifery Today, looking for someone to do book reviews. And I thought, oh yeah, double passion, writing, yeah, and book reviews in my garden, because if you remember the summer of 2020, it was lovely weather. And this is just a tiny smidgen of some that I've done in the last well, since the beginning of the year, actually. This one, which you can see at the top, is called Help, I'm Going to Be a Dad. That's another of my hats. I'm a trustee for APEC, Action on Preeclampsia. So that, as you can see, is ready to write up the review. But because of the business hat, I do get other books as well. So this is my latest from Friday. Hopefully you can see it says Eat That Frog. So if you wait for the review, you'll know why it's called Eat That Frog. So that one's to come. So these, as I say, are just a smidgen, and I get a huge number, which is fantastic, that gets sent to me. The interest for me has always been, there's embedded in that somewhere is that midwifery aspect. So some of the books I'm going to share with you this evening might seem a little strange, and you think, well, how do they fit into midwifery? But the three that I've picked to talk about the most, and I have to say, out of 42 book reviews that I've done since summer 2020, all have a very different aspect. So you might be surprised what I've picked. It's my choice, obviously. I did send them to Sue and she said, yep, that's fine. But they've all got a very, very, very different angle to them. So this is an interesting one. As you can see, it's called Belly Women. And if you read the book, you'll see why. What I will do in 2 out of the 3 books is say it's a very sensitive book. This is one that you have to have the right mindset. You have to be in a good place yourself before you can read this, because it is very moving. There are some very traumatic deliveries in here. And I think I just put that in as a warning for people. And I'll tell you what I do with books once I finish with them. So this is about the Ebola pandemic. So it's not about COVID, but it's obviously about a huge pandemic that was hitting particular parts of Africa. I heard Benjamin talk on a podcast, and I was just totally inspired by what this guy had done, along with other colleagues. He wasn't working on his own. Obstetrician gynecologist, as you can see, working for international agencies. But the way he spoke about what was going on with the Ebola just sent waves through me about some of the similarities with what we had been going through, and at that point was still doing when he wrote the book. You can see the date, 2022. And sadly, what was happening with Ebola was what we were hearing, seeing, hitting the press every 5 minutes. Things like the conspiracy theories. Now, you have to remember this is mainly based in parts of Africa, particularly Sierra Leone. Lack of PPE, those of us who worked clinically, which many of us did, including me, through COVID. Poor governmental support. Really found this very, very challenging to read. And I have to say, out of all the books I've ever reviewed, this one took me the longest to read. And I think Alice said about sometimes just giving yourself that space to think, it's okay, I can step back from this for a little while, I can come back to it. And I probably did that about half a dozen times with this book. They're always on my bedside cabinet, and I just, when I'm ready, I'll go back to it. What was really sad and made me really decide, yes, this is one I definitely not only want to review but share with you tonight, was Benjamin's phrase in the book. About halfway through, he said that they felt, this is the workers, as well as obviously the families that they were working with, felt abandoned by the world. And he carried on to say, had this been happening in a developed country or developed countries, and obviously what happened eventually, sadly, with COVID, they wouldn't have felt abandoned. They wouldn't have felt lost. Now, some of us may feel that anyway about COVID, but when you read it from a very different angle, I think it really made me sit back. So just that word of warning, it's not one, yes, it is, as I put, summertime reading, but you just have to be in the right place, I believe, before you might want to think about this one. But as I said, I will share with you what I do once the books are finished. A very different angle. This is from a colleague, Amanda Burley, who many of you may know, and I certainly do. I don't always get books sent to me. Sometimes people will actually ask me, and Amanda did with this book, as did Becky Reid with Closure, which is another book that I did a review on. So I do get books from lots of different colleagues. If I ever felt it was a book that I couldn't feel would do it justice, I would just email the author back and just say, this is not a book I feel I can do justice on a review. That's rare. I think it's only happened twice since I started. This in itself, at the beginning of Amanda's book, because it's about bullying and midwifery, which I know we've done sessions on these hours, there is a trigger warning from Amanda and her colleagues on the front cover before you even start the book. So I think authors are very sensitive to those who may be reading the book. And I think that's a good sign for me of an author anyway. There are lots of stories in it. They are very moving. I've just done, 4 or 5 bullet points here, but, stories about why midwives leave the NHS. And sadly, those who move into other, often non-midwifery roles, although, as Alice said, we have lots of different roles in midwifery, but we also have great skills, knowledge, experience, exposure to be able to take out of midwifery. So please don't undervalue what you're doing, what you've had. But if this is not the right time and place for you, please don't undervalue those skills and take them elsewhere. And of course, many midwives in different ways have gone into private practice. And, credit to them that that's the chosen avenue, possibly for short or maybe long term. Certainly, sadly, and I certainly have been very aware of these reports, the Kirkup reports in 2015 and 2022, talking about the poor culture. And having only recently retired from NHS after over 40 years, sadly, that is still out there. And it's about, why do we feel that we do this to each other? Why is there this bullying attitude? And the students have written their stories as well about how they're bullying. And it's very subtle bullying, they write. Sadly, sometimes about being excluded. So when you read the stories, it's simple things sometimes that might seem simple when we're reading them, but simple things like being excluded from meetings, coffee rooms. I mean, it's quite amazing. And that subtle bullying, in some ways, may be harder for some people to take on board than very obvious bullying, because it's verbalized, it's seen, it can be felt. So, yeah, it's a very moving book. However, on the positive, because it is so important, what I did after I read this book was, where do I go and get assistance if this was me going through it? And I will tell you, I was bullied in one of my jobs. And for someone who's big and tough and 42 years, as a midwife, it was very subtle. Was I naive? Yeah, probably was a bit, actually. I didn't think everyone was going to be a lifelong friend and that everyone was going to love me, but it was very subtle bullying. So I had to think back to what I did when that was happening, and I left that job. And the RCN were certainly my port of call to start with, but there are so many other ports of call now. So I've already mentioned our own forums here, and that's another role that I'm very privileged to belong to. I'm on their advisory group. If you've never encountered them, have a look at TED Talks, because they look at other disciplines who are bullied, and it is pretty universal, I'm afraid to tell us. But I've used TED Talks for a lot of things, but I've also used it after reading Amanda's book. and it is pretty universal. But I think sometimes when you look outside your own profession, it doesn't always make you feel better, but it just makes you realise that it is sadly pretty universal. So sometimes that's not always a bad way of looking at things. And then this final book, because I thought, let's have something really unusual. And this is from America. I didn't physically get the book, which was a bit sad, but I certainly got it online and read it through and then did the review. So it's called My Extraordinary Face. And as you can see, I've just pulled out some of the quotes that I used in the review, but it explores how children have a special trick. You can see from the pictures, these are children who have some changes, a facial difference, as they call it at the end. I love this one. They gather up love, care and kindness and make it a protective bubble. And I, sadly, over my career, have certainly delivered babies with some facial difference. Certainly, I've delivered babies with hair lip. So, yeah, it resonated. It's what Alice said about the stories. I love this as well. The book stresses to the children, this is very much aimed at the children, that they are confident, they're special, they're one of a kind, and their smiles lighten up the world. And then finally, because it is very, very easy to read, for parents, it's also aimed at, of course, us as health professionals, but this is aimed at children. And as I say, their description is of those who have a facial difference. And I think sometimes just the words, trying to think if you've got a parent, who wasn't expecting, a baby with a hair lip or any other facial, to be able to use that word, I thought was very powerful. So looking outside, as I said, pure midwifery sometimes really enhances what I do. So again, contact details, but I don't just sit with these books all behind me here. These, as I say, are reviews that I've been doing for Midwifery Today in the USA since 2020. They're not protected, so if anybody is interested in any of them, they're very short. You're very welcome to email me and say, oh, I see you did this review, are you willing to share it? But once the books, because I don't just want them sitting on my shelf, I want these to get out there. I donate them to my local NHS medical library. So they're out there for anyone and everyone, people who have read them. There's lots of intra-library loans, and I know some of the books have gone out. And I have to thank the librarians at my medical library, because now I've left the NHS, you sometimes feel you're a bit left behind. And I don't have much access to medical libraries except through the one I've just retired from. So I do thank them. It's a big thank you, because they're fab at getting books and articles that I would struggle to do perhaps on my own. So I don't know, I think Sue said at the beginning, but this all goes into my portfolio for my revalidation, because again, you have to look at other avenues, particularly if you work outside mainstream clinical. But, my gurus of that have been people like Alice, and you think, well, how do they do their portfolio? Like many of us, yes, we did work clinical, but I don't work clinical now, certainly not in the UK. So, this goes into my portfolio with my evidence, and I'm due for revalidation next year. I have no worries, no problems that I will be revalidated, because all of my work goes into that. So it's just a smidgen of some of those books that I've reviewed. Sue very kindly mentioned that, yes, I am rewriting my book. It's going to be a whole new book. There will be some things that are similar, because not everything has changed in the water birth world. But the one big chapter that will be drastically changed is the research. The amount of international research that is now coming out about water birth has absolutely, sorry, I'm just about to turn that off. Nobody should ring me on the house phone. And it's absolutely phenomenal. So my nagging, Alice says about, have trust in yourself and don't feel like you've got the imposter syndrome. Something I talk a lot about when I travel internationally, because up until a few years ago, lots of countries weren't publishing. They kept saying, well, you know, we've only done 50 water births, or we've only done 100 water births. And I remind them that the first article was Michel Audon in 1983 about his first 100 water births. So it doesn't matter whether you've done 25, 2, 1. Write the stories, get them published. And I do refer to Practicing Midwife a lot because I know they have a wonderful team to help. But don't undervalue those experiences. So that for me will be the biggest challenge. My plan is to get it out next year, but I'm not even putting a month on it yet. I'm going to wait and see what else comes up. So I thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful. And please do contact me, because I've got, as I say, 42, soon to be 43, and after that 44 book reviews. And you're very welcome to have a look. And I do put the cost on, because I know money is often an issue for a lot of us, but all of those, apart from that one from America, will be in our library. And of course, remember, libraries do borrow from each other. So thank you very much for your time.
Fabulous, Diane. Thank you so much. And it's very interesting because the themes for both of you is very much stories. And it's really great to be able to share that, because I mean, and I was thinking as you were, because I know you've been talking about your new water birth edition and how you're looking for stories. And when Alice was talking, I was thinking, oh, this is so midwifery, isn't it? That we love stories and we communicate by stories and we understand. And Alice put it beautifully about, you know, when we're teaching, you can give a whole load of facts about, and I love the skeleton too, skeletons, for example, but unless you link it up to say, well, do you know, this happened to me in the clinical area, and it doesn't mean anything. It gets piled away somewhere else. So thank you so much for sharing that, both of you. It's fantastic. Now, we've had a few comments. So we got Juliet Samuel, who's a long-term audience member. Hi, Juliet. And she says, love your passion, Alice. Love it. Okay.
Thank you.
And Jenny Hall, and also, hi, Jenny, says, fabulous, Alice. Thank you for the encouragement. I think there's going to be a little bit of writing going on here. Just a feeling. And then Leslie Ann Julian. Hi, Leslie Ann. She said that this was amazing. I'm a self-published author of a health visiting book, and I'm in the process of completing my second self-published book on breastfeeding. Wow. Like you, I'm also a nurse, midwife, and health visitor. Fantastic, Leslie Ann. I mean, we haven't talked about much about the sort of publication thing, because it always used to be in the olden days, if you were trying to get something published, you had to send, especially novels, you had to send it off to a publishing house. And but I've seen far more people who seem to be working on a self-published basis. I mean, what is this a big
Yes.
thing, and is it very expensive to do it?
It's easy to self-publish now. It doesn't cost an awful lot of money to self-publish, because you can publish using ebooks. You can use, I'm not going to mention the platform, but there's a well-known platform that does direct publishing where you get an ebook and then they print on demand. And a lot of publishers do that now. So where you'd have the old vanity publisher where you'd pay them to publish your book, now you don't pay very much, but and basically if somebody orders it, it gets printed. There's that. And also people are sharing more things, you know, via podcasts and websites and all kinds of other fora. So I think it's a lot easier, but this traditional route is still there, and it's harder than ever to actually go down the traditional route. Most people who want to publish fiction traditionally will have to try and basically send it out again and again and again to publishers and to agents to try and get it seen and known. But a lot of people now will start like creating an author identity for themselves and get themselves known online, get a reader base, and then say, well, look, I've got, 20,000 followers on Twitter, and they would all probably read my book if you publish it. So there's ways of doing it. But ultimately, when we're writing, I think we're writing because we want to write to share a story. The publishing bit is a whole other story.
Yeah.
I think Dan would agree.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, trying to get other publishers to really look. So yeah, mine will probably be self-published. It also, to an extent, takes some of the pressure off, because you said about, keeping to deadlines, but you have to have the deadline.
Absolutely.
And I have, 2025, and yeah. But other things take over. I have numerous roles, as we all do, not just work roles, but you have your families, and they're of course so important. They provide that support, so that they say, come on, it's time to write. My sister is brilliant on that. She says, I haven't seen anything to review for you for a while, Diane. And she knows me of old. She knows that I tend to write the way I speak. So the joke with her and she said, I'm sure your teachers at school must have had this, and when you were training, was that, do you remember the word full stops and commas and capital letters? But of course, when you're talking and your expresses, you don't think of that. But Helen does, my sister. So it's a big thank you to her. But, my family, my husband, they've all been so great, because they could just say, Di, you're mature now. Please don't call me old. You're mature now. Isn't it time? No, I'm not ready. I've got all of this ready to come out. I'm not ready to stop now.
And this is why you need someone who's going to kind of be a kind of critical reader.
Yes.
Who'll pick up when you've got a paragraph that big and no full stops. But also, sometimes when you're writing, and Alice probably would attest to this, that you think you've made sense, and then you go to the next day and you look at it and you think, I don't even understand what I was saying. What's it mean? But this is what is important. I think Alice made a good point about just writing, because actually first few things often are nonsense, or not nonsense, but they're not the finished, shiny, polished, beautiful thing that you're going to end up with. No, that's good. That's fab. Now, I'm going to ask, because when you were talking, the other thing I was thinking is starting small. And Alice has talked a bit about it. And in a way, Diane, you're just kind of illustrating how you can do this, because sometimes if you've got a novel in you, that's kind of getting to that point is quite a pathway, isn't it? And you could start in smaller ways.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, my first article, which went in what was then called the Midwives Chronicle, those of us who were more mature remember. I mean, it was a very short article, and it just expressed what happened with our first ever water birth. And then it just grew, and then I met a publisher at ICM in Vancouver, so that was 1990. No, sorry, Japan. And he said, well, why don't you write down what you're doing? And it's just gone from there. But I'm just as passionate about writing as I am about reviewing, and I read novels as well. But my passion is anything to do remotely with families, or as that book from America was. I mean, I was just overwhelmed by that one. I really was. So yeah, I do look outside the box, as they say.
And I think it's important for us to know what's out there, actually, and to have someone who's reviewing it, pointing to what could be useful and what maybe isn't so useful, is really helpful. Now, I'm getting a whole lot of things coming through, so excuse me for 1 minute. Now we've got Anne Elizabeth Isherwood. Hello, Anne Elizabeth. Says, what a wonderful programme to end the series on. Thank you. That's nice. And then great session. Storytelling so important in whatever format. I love Sway as a simple, engaging way of storytelling work and play. Now, Alice and Diane are nodding away. What is this thing called Sway?
Oh, Microsoft Sway. It's basically a part of the Microsoft Office suite. Not that I work for Microsoft. The suites are available. But it's basically like creating a web page. So you can do it as a presentation. It's got a certain amount of dynamic movement in it, and you can upload a document and then it turns it into something very readable, and you can add pictures and you can add graphics and you can add video. And I use it for teaching. I discovered it during the pandemic when I was teaching online, and its ability to provide you with something that's quite interactive. because you can embed media in it, you can embed quizzes in it, you can put lovely pictures on it. It's really easy, and then it's a web link, so you don't have to send somebody a big file. You just have a link, and then they open it up and they can watch it and read it. And
wow, gosh, I think this is going to be some homework for me. Goodness. And podcasts. Don't forget to listen to the Obs Pod in all that summer sun. Actually, that's a really good point, because that's the lovely Florence with her wonderful Obs Pod. That's always really good. Thank you for that. And Leslie Ann Julian says, I tend to sleep with a pen and paper near my bed. The ideas come and I jot it down so I remember the next day. Really good idea. Really good idea. Or if you're, more electronically minded, you might have some electronic notice. And then Jill Phillips. Oh, hi, Jill, again. She says, shout out to Flourish by Kate Greenstock for midwives everywhere. Well, funnily enough, there we are. It's one of the things.
I've done a review on that one as well, guys.
Absolutely brilliant.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. Thank you, Jill. That's lovely. I think, we have come to the end of the hour. I always say this hour is the shortest in the week, and it has been really so much this week. But I'm hoping that those of you who are watching have got some ideas for getting some ideas for some things to read over the summer, because it's just as Alice, both Alice and Diane, I think we are triplets here, definitely. But I think it's the reading and the writing that'll go together. And, I think you could start with a little poem. You can start with a little letter to the editor, for example. That's a good way to start. But, I think it's what does stop us is that imposter thing, isn't it? And I think you've both highlighted that. So thank you so much. Now, I'm going to say also a big thank you to Diane and Alice, of course, and to Jack, who's behind the scenes, making sure everything's recorded nicely, to go out on the podcast on Friday and to go out on Tuesday in the newsletter. Plus Paul, who's been sending the comments and questions through to me. So thank you so much to Paul as well. Now we're going to have a break, so stay safe and well. Make sure you've got your sunblock on when you're out in the sunshine. And actually, you should also take vitamin D, because of course if you have sunblock, you don't get enough vitamin D. There's my health message for the day. And we're going to see you in September for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. We've got some very interesting things planned. But if you've got ideas for things you'd like to see, send us a message and we'll try and include something in the series. And if it doesn't fit in next series, it'll fit in the next one. Don't forget to book for the Wales and South West Festival in Bath on the 17th of September. Bath Racecourse. Do book. Remember, if you can't get there, you'll always get the recorded version afterwards. And in the meantime, I'll say thank you for coming. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon in September. And thank you again to Alice and Diane.
I'm Nicole Rajan Brown. I'm a proud midwife, and I'm proud to be supporting the Maternity and Midwifery Forum, who have helped me to grow, and for creating wonderful professional digital and online resources for midwives across the globe. The Maternity and Midwifery Forum ran their programs free and online all through COVID. Now we want to grow the catalogue, spread it worldwide, and keep it free to use for students and staff. To do this, we have launched a fundraising appeal to help keep all of the 8 wonderful maternity and midwifery festivals free. Keep the weekly Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the weekly newsletters free to midwives and maternity staff. You regularly tell us how much you value these free resources, so do give what you can.
The Maternity and Midwifery Forum brings you Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. All your CPD and revalidation needs met in one place. Our expertly curated box sets are the perfect way to engage with the latest thinking, issue by issue. They make revalidation easy and are the perfect accompaniment to any project or university coursework. In addition to video from expert speakers across maternity and midwifery, there is easily accessible research and links to the latest government policy documents. Our reflective questions at the end are the perfect primer for your revalidation. In the same way the Maternity and Midwifery Forum provides certificates to show that you have attended these festivals, we can provide certificates for those who have consumed the content of a box set and submitted their written answers to the reflective questions provided by our curator, Dr. Jenny Hall. Midwives, maternity professionals and students, do not miss out. Subscribe to Matflix today. Check out the box sets at www.matflix.co.uk.
I'm Nicole Rajan Brown.